Hello everybody, hope you all are doing good out there. In this video, we are going to be doing a knife comparison between the Case Peanut and the Case Mini Trapper. These are, in my opinion, two of the best knives that Case has ever made. They're just designed perfectly. You know, Case has been in production for a long time. You know, over 100 years the company's been around. They've went through changes and different iterations throughout the years. But the thing is, they've been doing it so long, they've got a lot of the common patterns perfected. And in my opinion, a lot of their common patterns cannot be made better by any other company. They've got the design smoothed out, the weight's right, the thickness is right, and it's just the perfect balance. The Peanut and the Mini Trapper are two of the patterns that I feel this way about. And when I first was going to buy my first Case knife, they were the two knives that I was comparing, trying to figure out which one I wanted to buy. And I couldn't find any good comparison videos that went in depth. And so I figured I'd make one today. But these knives are somewhat similar for two reasons. The first is that they are both jackknives, meaning all the blades open on the one end. Both of them have liners. You know, there's a brass liner that goes down the center between the two blades. And both of them are, for the most part, two-bladed knives. So in that way, they're very similar. Two other similarities that these knives share is that they both have two back springs, and both of them have half stops. So when you open the blade, it's going to click into place at the 90 position. The Peanut and the Mini Trapper are identical in that regard. Both of these knives also have a large following from Case. So let's dig right in here and let's see what the main differences are between these. We'll compare the red Peanut and we'll do the blue Mini Trapper. The first thing we've got to notice is the closed length. The Peanut, as you could tell, is a lot smaller of a knife. You can't tell that from the pictures that you see on the internet, but it is a whole lot smaller of a knife. Sorry about bumping the camera there. But it's a lot smaller. It's smaller in every way. It's not as long, as you can see. It's not as wide, as you can see. And it's also not as thick from the back spring to the side of the blade. It's just a smaller knife all the way around. Measurement wise, the Peanut's handle comes in at 2 3/4. So 2 3/4 inches when it's closed. And the Mini Trapper is going to come right in at 3.5 inches. Now in my opinion, 3.5 inches is that perfect middle ground size for a pocket knife. You got the 18 patterns just a little bit longer than that. You got Mini Copperlocks just a little bit longer than that. Sodbuster Jr. is just a little bit longer than that. You've got the 032 pattern. Both the Texas Jack and the Stockman are right at that size, and the Canoe's around that size. That 3.5 to around 3 5/8 is a great medium-sized everyday carry knife, and you can't hardly go wrong with it. Now, the Peanut is more of a small carry knife, coming in at 2 3/4. Next thing we're going to look at is weight. Now we do have to say that weight can vary on Case knives depending on the handle material, the way that they have hefted the material, and the year of the knife. Sometimes there is a little bit of variation, but this is going to give us a general idea. The Mini Trapper is 2.55 ounces. 2.55 ounces. The Peanut is 1.25 ounces. So as you can tell, the Peanut is a whole lot lighter than the Mini Trapper. The Mini Trapper isn't by any stretch of the imagination a heavy knife, but it is heavier than the Peanut. Both of these knives have a main blade that is a clip point. And as we mentioned, they both have a half stop. Now, a lot of people like half stops. I like them myself. It's not a deal breaker with me. I kind of like the variety of having some knives with a half stop and some knives without them. But your main blade is going to be a clip point. Your secondary blade is going to be a pen knife on the Peanut. Where on this mini trapper, as we're going to see in a minute, its secondary blade is going to be a spade blade. Now you'll notice when you look at these, there's two main differences. The first is the length of the blade. The mini trapper has a lot longer blade than the Peanut does. The other thing is the positioning of the nail nick. The Peanut's nail nick is right about in the center of the blade. And I like the way that looks. Where the mini trapper's nail nick is on toward the back of the blade. I also like the way that looks. It's just a little style difference. Both of these knives make really good use of the kick, where the kick comes off of the handle. When you hold the mini trapper, for instance, your finger fits right in there very well and it's very comfortable. Same thing is true of the Peanut. The Peanut has more of a sloped shape, but your finger still fits in there really good and it's really comfortable. Your secondary blade on the Peanut, as we said before, is going to be a small pen blade, whereas your secondary blade on the mini trapper is going to be a full-sized spade blade. Now, if I've got my history straight, pen blades originated when they used to sharpen their quills, and that's a good everyday shape. That blade is strong. It's pretty thick, as you can see. It's pretty thick blade stock. It's a good length. It's easy to lay your finger on it like that for a depth gauge. If you're cutting into like a plastic clamshell package or something, or getting under a zip tie, this is a great blade for that. The blade on the mini trapper is known as a spade blade. They used to use this style of blade in the old days when they would castrate or neuter animals. Of course, most people don't use them for that anymore. But that's why the tip is not quite as pronounced. But a lot of people started using them when they were skinning animals, and they found that that worked very well also. Because the tip's not as sharp, you don't have to worry about puncturing the hide. Now, the one thing to keep in mind if you're using a spade blade is sometimes it comes in very useful not having as sharp of a tip. Because when a person's using a knife blade, sometimes they're doing some kind of slicing. Slicing through tape or whatever it might be. Other times they're doing some kind of task where they're needing to pierce. Well, you got to be careful when you're piercing with a slip joint anyways. You've really got to take into mind how you're holding the knife, and you have to be careful. Excuse me. And so the fact that the mini trapper doesn't have a really sharp tip on the spade blade is fine with me. But you got to keep in mind, you do have your regular blade, and your regular blade, as you can see, has a nice pronounced tip on it. Both of these blades are also on the mini trapper. You're going to see they're both about the same length. They're shaped differently. They have a different profile, but they're about the same length if you compare the ends. And this is not true at all on the Peanut. The Peanut's pen blade is a whole lot smaller than its main blade, as you can see. So that is one difference in these knives. Some people prefer the pen blade. Some people prefer the spade blade. It's just a matter of preference. I like both. Now there are some unique models out there that have a Wharncliffe blade instead of a spade blade on the mini trapper. I don't have one of them in a mini trapper, but I do have a similar style blade on a full-size trapper. This is a Wharncliffe blade, and some models will have this blade instead of this spade blade here. But the most of them by far are going to have this good old spade blade just like that. And the Peanuts. There's a few Peanuts out there that have a spade blade for a secondary, but they're few and far between. Also, each of these models can be found in a single blade knife, but it's just not very common and you don't see it very often. Now, as for the spring tension, every knife that's handmade is going to vary to some degree and a little bit. From my experience, these mini trappers tend to always have really good action on the springs. They're usually good and tight when you pull them up. They've got a good strong half click, click at the half stop. And they usually have a good opening click. And that's one of the things that makes a mini trapper, I think, so enjoyable to use, is the way that the walk and talk is on it. It's just, they're really good. I've only have one mini trapper that I've ever seen that didn't have a great walk and talk, and it's still got a good walk and talk, just not quite as good as the others. And that would be this Rogers corncob jig. The main blade is great. The spade blade is just a little weak. Still got good walk and talk, but it's just not quite as good as it could be. Now, I think some of that has to do with the location of the nail nick on the spade blade. Because it's all the way on the end on the mini trapper, that can give you more leverage, and it can make it feel like that blade has less tension. So if you've ever got a knife that you're worried it doesn't have enough spring tension, open it up and then push on the kick and see how springy it is, see how it does. That's the true way to test it. That way you take out the variables of leverage. The Peanuts action is usually really good too. They're always a real good click open. I've never met a Peanut that didn't click open really well. Sometimes they're a little softer on their half step, that half stop right there. Sometimes they're just a little slower in that click, depending on the knife. Plus, use, of course, can affect the walk and talk. Their secondary blade, the pin blade, from my experience, tends to have really good walk and talk. You can see it's got a good walk and talk to it. Now, I do have some Peanuts that are really, really crisp on the open and the close. This amber bone one is, for instance. But when it's all said and done, the Peanut and the mini trapper, both of them have a really good walk and talk, really good open and a close. And the more you use a knife, of course, as it wears in, the walk and talk is usually going to improve, especially if you keep the knife oiled up good. I like both of these knives, but both of these knives are fulfilling a different role. If you're looking for an everyday carry, and you sometimes do pretty big tasks, if the mini trapper is not too big for you at 3.5 inches, you'll probably really like it. On the other hand, if you really want a small knife, or you want to put a knife in your fifth pocket, or just say that you're carrying a modern folder, or a Leatherman multi-tool, or a Swiss Army knife or something, and you just want an extra knife, one of these little Peanuts would be a great option. Both of these knives have a big fan base. Both of these knives are built great. Both of these knives are readily available. And both have a lot of selection in the bone covers. Everything from the classic yellow Delrin to different kinds of woods, different kinds of bones. There's a lot of variation. So both of these knives are great. A lot of it just comes down to how big of a knife you want. If you're wanting a big knife, these are a good option. You can also get both of these models in either stainless steel or carbon steel. This is the first Peanut I ever got, my yellow Delrin Peanut. This one has Case's old CV steel in it. You can see it's developed a patina, and you can get either one of these patterns in carbon steel or in stainless. That yellow is one of the classics. This is a mini trapper in chrome vanadium also. This is a 2019. Peanut was a 21. But yeah, you can't go wrong with either one of these knives. Comment down below which of these knives you prefer, or if you use both just with a different application. They're great knives, and I don't think you can buy a Peanut or a mini trapper made by any other company that is as good as the Case models. At least that's my opinion on it. There's a lot of the other models out there that some of the other companies have specialized in and have kind of perfected over the years. But when it comes to these these particular models and the Case full-size trapper and the Sodbuster, in my opinion, Case has them down and makes the best pattern of them. Thank you all for watching. Comment down below what you think about these patterns. Have a good day and keep your knives sharp.